The big stations at both ends of the line each have a turntable. The Fat Controller had them made so that Edward, Henry, Gordon, and James can be turned round. It is dangerous for tender engines to go fast backwards. Tank engines like Thomas don't need turntables, so they can go just as well backwards as forwards. But if you had heard Gordon talking a short while ago, you would have thought that the Fat Controller had given him a tender just to show how important he was.
"You don't understand, little Thomas,"
said Gordon.
"We tender engines have a position to keep up. You haven't a tender? That makes a difference. It doesn't matter where you go, but we are important. And for the Fat Controller to make us shun trucks, fetch coaches, and go on some of those dirty sidings, well, it's not the proper thing."
And Gordon puffed away in a dignified manner. Thomas chuckled and went off with Annie and Clarabelle. Arrived at the terminus, Gordon waited till all the passengers had gotten out. Then, groaning and grumbling, he shunted the coaches to another platform.
"Disgraceful! Disgraceful!"
he hissed, as he ran backwards to the turntable. The turntable was in a windy place close to the sea. It was only just big enough for Gordon, and if he was not on it just right, he put it out of balance and made it difficult to turn. Today Gordon was in a bad temper, and the wind was blowing fiercely. His driver tried to make him stop in the right place. Backwards and forwards they went, but Gordon wasn't trying. At last Gordon's driver gave it up. The fireman tried to turn the handle, but Gordon's weight and strong wind prevented him. The drivers, some plate layers, and the firemen all tried together.
"It's no good,"
they said at last, mopping their faces.
"If you were a nice tank engine, you'd be all right. Now you'll have to pull the next train backwards."
Gordon came to the platform. Some little boys shouted, "Come on, quick! Here's the new tank engine!" "What a swizz," they said when they came near. "It's only Gordon, back to front." Gordon hissed emotionally. He puffed to the junction. "Hello," called Thomas. "Flying tank engines? Sensible engine. Take my advice. Scrap your tender and have a nice bunker instead." Gordon snorted, but didn't answer. Even James laughed when he saw him.
"Take care,"
hissed Gordon.
"You might stick too."
"No fear," chuckled James. "I'm not so fat as you." "I mustn't stick," thought James anxiously as he ran to the turntable later. He stopped on just the right place to balance the table. He could now swing easily. His fireman turned the handle. James turned, much too easily. The wind puffed him round like a top. He couldn't stop. At last the wind died down, and James stopped turning, but not before Gordon, who had been turned on the loop line, had seen him.
"Well, well, well,"
he said.
"Are you playing roundabouts?"
Poor James, feeling quite giddy, rolled off to the shed without a word. That night the three engines had an indignation meeting.
"It's shameful to treat tender engines like this."
"Yeah, Gordon has to go backwards and people think he's a tank engine."
"James spins around like a top and everyone laughs at us. And added to that, the Fat Controller makes us shunting dirty sidings."
"Ugh!" said all three engines together.
"Listen,"
said Gordon. He whispered something to the others.
"We'll do it tomorrow. The Fat Controller will look silly."
The engines had decided to go on strike. The Fat Controller sat in his office and listened. The Fat Controller frowned and said,
"Wait, what a nuisance passengers are. How can I work with all this noise?"
The station master knocked and came in looking worried.
"There's trouble in the shed, sir. Henry's sulking. There's no train, and the passengers are saying this is a bad railway." "Indeed,"
said the Fat Controller.
"We cannot allow that. Will you quiet the passengers, please? I will go and speak to Henry."
He found Henry, Gordon, and James looking sulky.
"Come along, Henry," he said. "It's time your train was ready." "Henry's not going,"
said Gordon rudely.
We won't shunt like common tank engines. We are important tender engines. You fetch our coaches and we will pull them. Tender engines don't shunt.
And all three engines let off steam in a cheeky way.
Whoosh! Oh, indeed,
said the Fat Controller severely.
We'll see about that. Engines on my railway do as they are told.
He hurried away, climbed into his car, and drove to find Edward.
The yard has never been the same since Thomas left,
he thought sadly. Edward was shunting.
Leave those trucks, please, Edward. I want you to push coaches for me in the yard.
Thank you, sir. That will be a nice change.
That's a good engine,
said the Fat Controller kindly.
Off you go, then.
So Edward found coaches for the three engines, and that day the trains ran as usual. But when the Fat Controller came next morning, Edward looked unhappy. Gordon came clanking past, hissing rudely.
Whoosh! Bless me,
said the Fat Controller.
What a noise!
They all hiss me, sir, answered Edward sadly. They say tender engines don't shunt, and last night they said I had black wheels. I haven't, have I, sir?
No, Edward, you have nice blue ones, and I'm proud of you. Tender engines do shunt, but all the same, you'd be happier in your own yard. We need a tank engine here.
He went to an engine workshop, and they showed him all sorts of tank engines. There were big ones and little ones, some looked happy and some looked sad, and some looked at him anxiously, hoping he would choose them. Choose me! Don't choose me! Choose me! It's me! Me! At last he saw a smart little green engine with 4 wheels.
That's the one,
he thought.
If I choose you, will you work hard?
Oh, sir! Yes, sir!
That's a good engine. I'll call you Percy.
Yes, sir! Thank you, sir! said Percy happily. So he bought Percy and drove him back to the yard.
Edward,
he called.
Here's Percy. Will you show him everything?
Percy soon learned what he had to do, and they had a happy afternoon. Once Henry came by hissing as usual.
Whoosh!
Whoosh! said Percy suddenly. Henry jumped and ran back to the shed. How beautiful you wished him, laughed Edward. I can't wish like that. Oh, said Percy modestly, that's nothing. You should hear them in the workshop. You have to wish loudly to make yourself heard. The next morning, Thomas arrived. The Fat Controller sent for me. I expect he wants help, he said importantly to Edward. Shh, shh, here he comes.
Well done, Thomas. You've been quick. Listen. Henry, Gordon, and James are sulking. They said they won't shunt like common tank engines, so I've shut them up, and I want you both to run the line.
Common tank engines indeed, snorted Thomas. We'll show them.
And Percy here will help too,
said the Fat Controller. Oh, sir, yes, sir, please, sir, answered Percy excitedly. Edward and Thomas worked the line. Starting at opposite ends, they pulled the trains, whistling cheerfully to each other as they passed. Percy sometimes puffed along the branch line. Thomas was anxious, but both driver and guard promised to take care of Annie and Clarabelle. There were fewer trains, but the passengers didn't mind. They knew the 3 other engines were having a lesson. Henry, Gordon, and James stayed shut in the shed, and were cold, lonely, and miserable. They wished now they hadn't been so silly. Henry, Gordon, and James were shut up for several days. At last, the Fat Controller opened the shed.
I hope you are sorry,
he said sternly,
and understand you are not so important after all. Thomas, Edward, and Percy have worked the line very nicely. They need a change, and I will let you out if you promise to be good.
Yes, sir, said the 3 engines. We will.
That's right. But please remember that there's no shunting nonsense must stop.
He then told Edward, Thomas, and Percy that they could go and play on the branch line for a few days. They ran off happily and found Annie and Clarabelle at the junction. The 2 coaches were so pleased to see Thomas again, and he took them for a run at once. Edward and Percy played with trucks. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" screamed the trucks as they were pushed into their proper sidings, but the two engines laughed and went on shunting till the trucks were tidily arranged. Next, Edward took some empty trucks to the quarry, and Percy was left alone. Percy didn't mind that a bit. He liked watching trains and being cheeky to the engines. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he would call to them. Gordon, Henry, and James got very cross. After a while, he took some trucks over to the main line to another siding. When they were tidy, he ran onto the main line again and waited for the signalman to set the points so he could cross back to the yard. Edward had warned Percy, "Be careful on the main line. Whistle to the signalman you are there." But Percy didn't remember to whistle, and the signalman was so busy he forgot Percy. Bells rang in the signal box. The man answered, saying the line was clear, and set the signals for the next train. Percy waited and waited. The points were still against him. He then looked along the main line. "Peep, peep!" he whistled in horror, for rushing straight towards him was Gordon with the express.
"Poop, poop, poop!"
whistled Gordon. His driver shut off steam and applied the brakes. Percy's driver turned on full steam. "Back, Percy, back!" he urged, but Percy's wheels wouldn't turn quickly. Gordon was coming so fast that it seemed he couldn't stop. With shut eyes, Percy waited for the crash. His driver and fireman jumped out. "Whoa!" groaned Gordon.
"Get out of my way!"
Percy opened his eyes. Gordon had stopped with Percy's buffers a few inches from his own. But Percy had begun to move. "I won't stay here! I'll run away!" he puffed. He was soon clear of the station and running as fast as he could. He went through Edward's station, whistling loudly, and was so frightened that he ran right up Gordon's hill without stopping. He was tired then and wanted to stop, but he couldn't. He had no driver to shut off steam and to apply the brakes. "I shall have to run till my wheels wear out," he thought sadly. "Oh dear! Oh dear! I want to stop! I want to stop!" he puffed in a tired sort of way. He passed another signal box.
"I know just what you want, little Percy,"
called the man kindly. He set the points, and Percy puffed wearily onto a nice empty siding ending in a big bag of earth. Percy was too tired now to care where he went. "I want to stop! I want to stop! I have stopped!" he puffed thankfully as his bunker buried itself in the bank.
"Never mind, Percy," said the workmen as they dug him out. "You shall have a drink and some coal, and then you'll feel better."
Presently Gordon arrived.
"Well done, Percy. You started so quickly that you stopped a nasty accident."
"I'm sorry I was cheeky," said Percy. "You were clever to stop." Percy now works in the yard and finds coaches for the trains. He is still cheeky because he is that sort of engine, but he is always most careful when he goes on the main line.